And it is 10 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome to the Texas Children in Nature Network webinar, Breaking Play Barriers, How to Get Out of Your Own Way and Let Play Lead the Way with Aid Hofmann. My name is Sarah Coles, and I am the Executive Director of the Texas Children in Nature Network, and we're excited to have you with us today. We are recording our session, and thank you for joining us. To save bandwidth for all of our attendees and for a clean recording, we ask everyone to turn off their cameras and mute themselves during the presentation. I will be monitoring the chat, so you can share your questions there, and I'll share them with our presenter. And please remember to keep the comments in the chat kind. Melody Alcazar is running tech for us today. Thank you, Melody. As I said, we're recording the session. Alice will be sharing it in a follow-up email in the coming days. If you're uncomfortable with your name showing, you can change your name to anonymous and then private message Melody with your name for our attendance. Also, if your Zoom name doesn't match the name you registered with, please either change your name by clicking the three little dots or let Melody know. If you're in need of a certificate and we do not have your name, we will not be able to provide a certificate. And just a reminder, if you are needing a certificate, you will need to follow the email, the directions you got in the Zoom link email. I'm going to go ahead and do our land acknowledgement. Texas Children in Nature is on the ancestral and unceded land of the Tonkawa, Comanche, and Sana people. Our ongoing colonial presence on Indigenous lands compels us to take action now to counteract the effects of colonization. The work we do through the Texas Children in Nature Network is one small step towards that effort. I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat in just a minute about land acknowledgements. And now I'd like to welcome our speaker, Aid Hofmann from Nature Play All Day. Thank you for presenting today, and I'm going to let you take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. It feels like it was just a few weeks ago, but it wasn't, in Texas in Houston for the in-person version of this. And I'm just really glad to be working with Texas Children in Nature Network yet again. So welcome, everybody. I have a ton of information, so I'm going to kind of jump right into it. Before I do, I want to just mention that I'm going to ask you to, if you feel comfortable, use the chat as an interactive place to share thoughts, obviously questions, and maybe some reflections as we move forward in this work today. I have also a QR code at the end of this presentation that will give you all of the resources that I mentioned throughout this training. So rest assured you will have access to that at the end of the presentation. All right, let's do it. I'm Aid. This is me. This is a perfect picture for today because we're expecting about 6 inches of snow here in Maine. I live in a tiny town called Montville. My program is in a town called Appleton, and that is all part of Mid-Coast Maine. I have been teaching for just shy of 2 decades with young children ages 2 to 6/7. I started my outdoor teaching journey actually in Texas in 2017 when I left the traditional classroom and traded in fluorescent lights for sunshine. I took a part-time, pretty much volunteer gig at a nature center, helping their preschool program. And I fell in love with the rhythms and routines that were happening there. And then looked for a program in Maine. And my partner and I moved here. We had visited and loved it. And that's how I ended up from Texas to Maine. That's the very short version of that story. My love languages are words and pictures. So I love to take pictures of a program. I love to write about our program and just really reflect on our practices and how being outside with children in nature for extended periods of time is really just so beneficial for all of us and every aspect of our life. You can find me on Instagram. I have a lot of my musings on there. I also have newsletters and things like that. In 2023, I finally found land. I've been looking since we moved here and founded a program on my own that is fully off-grid, nature and play-based for early childhood, and that is slated to open this summer. So I've been toiling away at that, and that's what I do here in Maine. among other things. But that's just a little bit about myself and a little bit about my background. I want to give you a little bit of a roadmap for today so you have an idea of where we're headed. Sometimes that's helpful. So I'm going to start off with an activation to really set the tone and set the mindset for today. It's going to be a really important piece of getting in the right frame of mind to talk about this concept of play barriers, to talk about our practice of being outdoors with children, and how we can facilitate more and more of that as we move forward in our practice. We'll define the terms, play barriers, and give you examples of different ones that some other educators and caregivers have come up with in other trainings in the past. I will share with you my idea of the observation continuum, which will kind of give you an idea of where you are in stepping out of the play versus stepping in. We'll address some of the benefits of play. They are infinite, so I could probably do a 4-hour training on that, if not more, but we're just going to kind of scratch the surface today. There's some resources at the end of this presentation for you to download, print, save, and share with your team as well that dive in a little bit deeper to the benefits of play. We're going to use some play scenarios to practice what we have learned about what comes up for us, which are our play barriers, and how to kind of work around them, acknowledge them, and push through them. I've got some play scenarios that we'll put up on the screen, and we can use the chat to kind of coordinate and reflect on what we see or what might be coming up for us. So please feel free to use that as a tool today. And then we'll start closing up with some tactical guidance, some tools that I use in my Great Observer course. These are going to be 3 of my top ways for us to stop talking all the time and instead start observing, which then leads to a deeper connection with our kids, our students, our children. So I'm going to share with those tools at the very end. And that is just a snippet of the other offering that I have called You Are a Great Observer. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then, of course, I have some resources to share because I love to give all the information to all of you because it just seems like all of us like to have as much as we can at our hands. And then I believe we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. Sarah will give me a polite nudge when I need to stop talking. So if I'm talking a little bit fast, it's for 2 reasons. 1, I'm very excited. And 2, I have a lot of information that I want to get through with you today. So let's begin. So this is our activation. I'm going to invite you all to, if this feels safe and good for you, to revisit a special place from your childhood. It doesn't have to be an outdoor space. It could be an indoor space. It could be maybe someone's home that you visited as a child. And I'm going to invite you to really transport yourself back into a childhood haven, a place where you felt safe. You felt like you had infinite possibility at your fingertips. Maybe this is a place in your backyard. Maybe this is a neighborhood park. Maybe this is a corner in your home. We had a little crawl space off of my bedroom closet that I loved. And this is a place that I return to often in my mind that felt like a magical, mystical place. As you think of these things, feel free to share them in the chat. It also can help others to kind of feel more comfortable and share and practice in this exercise as well. But picture these sights, the sights of this special place. Picture maybe the sunlight dancing through the leaves, the walls adorned with special treasures you may have found with your little tiny hands, your vibrant colors, maybe painting the landscape, the hills, the forest, the cityscape. Maybe it's a dimly lit passageway. Recall the sounds of rustling leaves, creaking floorboards, bird songs, or laughter. Feel the textures, the rough bark, the cool earth, soft blankets, warm sun. And as you visualize this special place, breathe in the scents that surround you. The earthy soil, the sweet flowers, the musty books, maybe the tang of adventure. This special place likely offered you a sense of freedom, which inspired grand adventure or quiet contemplation? I invite you to just think for a moment about this space and visualize. Were you alone? Were you with friends? Were you with family? Were you with animals? Were you with pets? Were you with creatures, nature? What types of dreams and ideas did this space foster for you? If you could return to it today, just as it was many years ago, what would it bring to the surface for you? What kind of feelings, what kind of senses would it bring to you? We cherish these moments because this is here in the realm of imagination where anything is possible. These hidden away special places from our childhood, these are where the magic of our childhood resides. This is where it lives on. We can tap into this anytime. And the reason this is so important to start off today is that I want you all to remember what it was like to be little, to be free, to be uninhibited with adventure and possibility, because this is going to be the thing that kind of weaves all of our work together. And I will loop back to that in just a little while. So you can share in the chat some of those spaces for you, or maybe some of the ideas and thoughts that came to mind during this exercise. This is also a really great exercise to do with new teachers if you are incorporating more play or more nature into your rhythms and routines. So as we move forward, just hang on to that kind of sensation that this special place brought to you, that magic. All right, we're going to define some terms here. I'm not sure how many of you have heard the term play barrier. It was new to me, maybe, I don't know, 6-8 years ago. I'd never really heard of it before. And when I did, it kind of cracked open a whole new world for me in my practice and how I shared space with children. So to define this term, play barriers are what gets in our way when we want to incorporate play, but instead end up veering off course from trusting play as learning. And I might say it once, I might say it 100 times today, play and learning are synonymous. It is the most authentic version of learning is play. And so many of these play barriers, the things that keep us from experiencing long, uninterrupted time of play, many of these barriers stem from things that we've learned over the years that pertain to the way being a teacher looks, sounds, and feels like, how it should look, sound, and feel like. If you can remember, maybe if you're an educator like myself, I used to play teacher all the time, and I used to do certain things that I thought a teacher should do. And they're actually all things that I don't do now as an adult, as a real teacher. It's interesting to think about, you know, how society and how just the world has shaped what we think teaching should look, sound, and feel like. And a lot of those things are actually barriers that we're going to work through as we find our way to trust play. So this work of identifying play barriers, identifying the things that kind of live inside of us that have just been passed down to us just by being in the world. This is the work that's going to change the way that we see early childhood education. It's going to change it for good, like forever for you and your practice, but for good, for better, for the children and the families in our programs and in our care. So as we move through this, a good question to keep in mind is what keeps you from fully trusting play? I didn't trust play for a very long time because I didn't think that that was learning until I tried it on, and I never wanted to go back. I started to see that magic that we talked about in our visualization activation exercise. So consider what keeps you from fully trusting play as we move through that. It's a good kind of underlying question to keep at the forefront as we move forward. And I love good examples and I love good context, obviously. And I want to share with you that everyone has play barriers. Sometimes people say to me, well, Aid, like you teach about this and you are like fully nature and play-based programming and you must be an expert at this. Surely I also have play barriers and everyone has them. And even if we think we don't, we've got them. We just have to work a little bit harder to open ourselves up to seeing them, acknowledging them, and then working with them past them and to the point where we do trust play and see it as learning. Some common barriers that some educators have shared with me in other trainings in the past have been injury. This comes up a lot with risky play, stick play, climbing, even just climbing up the slide. That is a barrier. Challenging topics such as violent play present barriers for educators as well. They're difficult concepts to talk about with staff, with family, with admin. Classroom management, there is a huge kind of misconception that play-based, fully play-based environments are chaotic and very Lord of the Flies-esque. I assure you that is not the case. It actually promotes more trust and inherently kind of like more of this silent structure, which is really magical. Other barriers are messes. I was one of those teachers who didn't allow glitter in my old classroom because I didn't want to clean it up. So this may resonate with you, dumping of glue or water or sand or getting really muddy, like these beautiful little toes in this slide. These children had made this lovely mud puddle and there was a very hot day in August and they were covered in head to toe, like everything, hair, everything covered in mud. And they were having like just the absolute time of their lives. And we just hosed down afterward and it really wasn't a terrible mess. It didn't take much time at all. But the old aide would not have wanted to do that. So this is an example too of growth. That this was a barrier for me that I've worked past, and we'll get through those tools in a little bit on how to do that. Not enough time is another barrier. A lot of educators have a very tight schedule. We have a very organized way of moving through the day. And so we might not feel like we have enough time to clean up the mess or enough time to go outside or enough time to have long 45-minute chunks of time of play. I work with a lot of educators and do consults to find at least 2 45-minute blocks within the day to have those free or that feels hard for you guys, please do reach out. I'm happy to help you. And the last common barrier is conversations with parents. This kind of touches on the challenging topics barrier. It's hard to share with a parent that their child was hurt, that you had to fill out an incident report. You have to have a conversation with the admin if someone gets hurt. And so instead of kind of working through that uncomfortableness, we just say, yeah, no, we don't play with sticks here. I did that. That's a story I like to tell. I might save that for later, but I was a teacher who said that we didn't play with sticks in my classroom, and I just left it at that. And it really came down to me not wanting to have conversations of, injury. And it really ended up translating, and this is how the play barrier concept for me started to unfold itself, is that I was afraid. I had fears of being seen as an unfit caregiver. I had fears of being judged by others, be it parent, staff, admin. I didn't want to be not accepted. And I didn't want to go against the grain because it felt uncomfortable. Now I welcome all of that. I've kind of really come, done a total 180. But a lot of these fears and barriers come down to, what are we afraid of? What is making us so uncomfortable? And these are conversations that are hard to have with ourselves, but they're absolutely essential if we want to expand in our practice and deepen our practice of connecting with children through play, right? Through trusting play. So breaking play barriers allows reflection to become the teacher instead of rote memorization, facts, things like that. And when we break these play barriers, it presents us with opportunities to rebuild our conceptions, our ideas, our values, and really expand and just have a whole new world. Your kind of line of vision goes from very narrow to this wide angled view. I like to say to people, it's kind of like when you go hiking. Once you are doing all the hard work of climbing and making the ascent, those are kind of addressing your play barriers. You get to the very top, you get to the summit, and you have this beautiful, wide, sweeping panoramic view. And that is the reward that we have when we work through these play barriers. We get to really, really see this beautiful, wide picture of learning through play, and that have been making it a little bit about us and not actually about the children. So I have this idea called the observation continuum. I'm going to kind of go a little bit quickly through this. This is something that I go into a little bit more in depth in my Great Observer course, but I thought it was important to share. The observation continuum idea is an idea that we are all on this continuum of either just watching children, like just being in a space with them and seeing them, all the way to a place where we are observing and actively reflecting on what we see, which is inherently trusting the children to do the right thing, trusting them to be safe, trusting them to do what is best for them and their learning journey. And those are kind of the two bookends of the observation continuum. And many of us fall somewhere in between. I like to think of the beginning of the observation continuum as like the classic recess, where like the teachers are outside, we're all wearing our recess coats and the children are just kind of doing their thing and we're just there. We have eyes on them, but we're not really deeply listening or reflecting on what we're observing the children engaged in, which is the opposite end, which is being a true observer. And again, I've been mentioning this several times, but a lot of the aspects of where you are on this continuum have to do with the things that have been ingrained in our culture, that a teacher's role is to check in, ponder out loud about the work that the child is doing or engaged in, and provide, quote, rich activities for children to choose from. And a lot of the times, you might agree with me that you've spent hours on this wonderful idea or project or offering, and the children want nothing to do with it. And you have spent many, many hours. And it's like, why did I do that? The children don't even want to do that. And I think that that comes from a lot of what we think it's supposed to mean to be a teacher. So play barrier work will help you redefine what it means for you to be an educator, teacher, or facilitator, whatever it is you call yourself. So I'm going to kind of zip through this a little bit and just give you the three kind of main points of the continuum. At the very beginning, there's watching. This is very surface level. And if you quickly look at this definition, there are terms like secretive observation, guarding, exercising caution and restraint, be on the lookout or alert for things. And this is very like, guarded. And when we're watching, we're not connected. And as we move along the observation continuum, we become more and more connected with the child's play, which helps us to fully embody and practice that play is learning. Around the middle of the continuum, you'll see noticing is a little bit closer to an involvement and connected way of being with children. You're paying attention, right? You're really taking the time to pay attention to something specific. You might be facilitating some sort of preparation or anticipating what might be happening next. So there's some more kind of reflecting happening, and you're more aware of what's going on instead of just being in the vicinity. You're actually noticing and you're starting to reflect, what you see happening before you. And the ultimate goal is to become a great observer, is what a term that I like to use. And this is the sweet spot. This is where you're perceiving things and recognizing them as significant. This is not just children who are running in circles. This is like, wow, this particular child loves to run in this particular way at this particular time of day with these particular set of other children, or this child really every single day we go outside is in the sandbox, is doing X, is doing Y, X is doing Z. What does that mean? What kind of thing or sensory are they seeking? So you start to really watch particular children, you start to reflect on their actions, you're very attentive to their actions. And then by reflecting deeply, you're actually celebrating and acknowledging their unique way of being in the world. And that is when we really get to see and value the beauty of each individual child. And so when you are a great observer and you're all the way on the other end of the observation continuum, right, you're in the sweet spot, You see every child as an individual, and you're celebrating their unique gifts and talents and interests that they have in the world and that they bring to the world. So that is a very brief overview of the observation continuum, but it kind of gives you an idea of where you are, where you're headed, where you've been, where you're going. And this is like, I feel like if you take anything, anything from this course, please take this reminder. This phrase is my grounding practice. When I feel overwhelmed, when I feel really worried, when I feel fear driving me to make a decision in the classroom, I take pause and I remind myself that the space we share with children is a stage for learning. It is not an opportunity for me to dictate what their learning looks like, to project my personal fears and whatever's on them. This is a space for them. My job is to give care, to facilitate learning. It is not to be the all wise and knowing. It is not to be the person who is like the rule enforcer. That is not our role. Right? If you break apart our names of caregivers, right? We give care, we provide care. And so this phrase, the space we share with children, is a stage for learning, is always something that I repeat to myself on the hardest of days. And it brings me right back to center. It brings me right back to the point I need to be to let children lead and let play lead the way to authentic learning experiences. So please, if you take anything away from today, please take this and try it in your day-to-day. When things feel crazy, bananas, wild, pause, say this phrase, and reflect on what you see. That's the very short version of today. But let's move forward. So we talked a lot about observing play, and again, I'm going to zip through this a little bit. This benefits of play checklist that I have created is available in the resources at the end of this presentation with the QR code. So don't worry too much about what you see here on the screen. You'll have access to that shortly. But this playlist, this benefit of play checklist, is going to serve as a very valuable tool for teachers, educators, caregivers, all the people that share space with children, to establish connections to the diverse developmental advantages of play in young children. This comprehensively covers key areas of development: cognitive development, physical development, imagination, creative development, and social emotional development. By using this checklist, we get to empower ourselves as observers and actively engage with children's play, therefore unlocking more extended opportunities for uninterrupted play sessions. This tool, this checklist, is going to serve as a supportive guide for anyone who shares space with children and remind you that play is learning. So when you're playing I Spy, you're actually building skills in observation and attention, which is a huge valuable skill that children will take with them far beyond pre-K, first, second grade. There's lots of examples of this in the checklist, and I use this a lot. I had it on my teacher clipboard at my old preschool, and I kept it with me all the time, just to remind myself that when I see a child climbing up the slide, what type of physical cognitive benefit am I witnessing here? It kind of took me out of this, like, oh no, you're not supposed to climb up the slide, to aha, you're climbing up the slide because, or when you climb up the slide, you are learning X, Y, or Z. This is, again, available to y'all at the end of this presentation, but this is a very, very handy tool. We're gonna take a quick look at just, I think there's one or two of these in the presentation, but there's also, I have broken them down into just different genres. So there's the cognitive section, social, emotional, etc. But I've made cards that you can print, laminate, and put on a little binder ring and keep them on like your teacher fanny pack. If you have one, that's what I have, or on your clipboard, is handy to you. But this is just a kind of zoomed in look as what they look like. So these are all different ways that play is learning, right? Maybe they are putting things on, let me think for a second. Let's see, they're building this tower out of stones, or they're building a tower out of blocks, and they're just building. And all of a sudden it tips over. That's STEAM and STEM. That's problem solving. What do I do now because it's gotten too high and it's tipped over? How tall is it? Is it taller than me? Measurement. They're counting maybe how many long blocks, how many short blocks. They could be doing all sorts of different cognitive learning functions and development in just building a tower or making a pile of something. So this is very handy for y'all to have. Again, these are available with that QR code at the end of the presentation. But the benefits of play checklist is going to be the thing that's going to stop you like right in your tracks from saying, no, don't do that, to, okay, why are they doing this? Why is this child doing this? What is it actually bringing to the table for their development? So highly suggest employing these resources there. This is an acronym that I love. It's called WAIT, stands for Why Am I Talking? I have really gotten much better at this, but early on in my career and in my practice of being with children, I constantly interrupted them, whether they were at the easel or they were digging in the sandbox or whatever they were doing. I would always stop and check in with them. And then I heard this acronym at a professional development years ago. Why am I talking? WAIT. And this has served as a very helpful cue for when we have that urge to check in with children, right? That's the way that we were taught teaching looks, sounds, and feels like, right? Oh, what are you doing today? Oh, might you tell me more about what you're painting? Or, oh, what is that a picture of? Things like that. We actually don't have to do all of that. We can actually take pause before we get all up in their space, before we even open our mouths, and consider, why are we about to step in? Why are we going to ask them about what they're drawing? Do we really need to know? Is stepping in actually about the child, or is it about how we think we're supposed to be showing up in the space? So using this WAIT acronym, when we want to step in and pause and take pause instead, flips the script. It returns us to the notion that the space that we share with children is a stage for learning, not a stage for redirection back to production mode, right? You're pumping out like handprint turkeys at Thanksgiving. Like that is not, it's not developmentally appropriate. And it's like not about the child, right? You're pumping out those things because maybe parents really want that product, but it's not. So I like to use that example because I did it. I spent hours cutting out penguin feet and bunny ears of construction paper for craft projects. So I hear you, I've been there. So please know that it's coming from a place that I have done that as well, and then moved past that into really honoring the space that we share and everything we do in that space as a space that is really honoring the child's learning journey and really nothing else. There is a little thing called intrinsic motivation. If you've heard of intrinsic motivation before, you can just pop maybe, I don't know, a number 1 in the chat or something. This is something that I was not taught in grad school. I was not taught in undergrad when I was studying education. But when I learned about intrinsic motivation, I finally realized that this is what makes play learning. Intrinsic motivation is the thing that makes the brain super sticky and ready to absorb like any and all information. So if you have ever been like super engrossed in an activity, or maybe you have a hobby, or you've seen a child that's like really, really into wheels that spin, their brain, when they're in that moment and you kind of have to like, hello, are you there? Can you hear me? They're really in it. They're deep in it. Their brain is so absorbent at that time that like really nothing else matters. The intrinsic motivation is activated, especially when windows of play are extended, and there's freedom for children to make their own decisions. So let's just think about centers for just a moment. Many of us may have employed centers in our classrooms. I've done it for many years. And now I do something different. I use offerings that are often out for many weeks and maybe not touched. But we're going to touch on this too in just a moment. But sometimes when the bell rings or the chime chimes, children are like just getting into something and they're frustrated. They don't want to leave the center. They're like, I just started building, and then everybody has to move. So when they're giving you that kind of hard pushback, right? They're really into something and they don't want to stop. That is an implication that their intrinsic motivation is activated because they are really sticky. Their brain is sticky. They've been given a longer period of time to engage in something and however they see fit, however feels best to them. And they've been able to have an opportunity to make their own decisions. And their intrinsic motivation, like the activation of that, is only possible when we release those old beliefs that we've been talking about all morning of what it means to look, sound, and be a teacher in the classroom, right? There's this weird thing about that we should know all the answers and that we should have all the control. I highly disagree with that because I've been practicing letting go of that and seeing such a deeper connection with children, with families, and a huge shift in learning. There's been just deep, amazing, impactful learning happening in our classrooms when we release this need to know all the answers, have all the solutions, hold control, right? That is a play barrier for me that I work on constantly, that I don't need to have control, say. The intrinsic motivation is an experience for the child. Like, this is all about the child, again, child-led, child-centered, but it is not an opportunity to collect a manicured product like those handprint turkeys, those cookie cutter construction paper project from Pinterest. The word experience here is really key. So your intrinsic motivation is activated when you're having a like full body, immersive sensory experience. And when that is motivated, when that is activated, you are like children, and you too, even if you're engaged in some sort of activity that's really enticing to you, you lose track of time, right? That is a sign that your intrinsic motivation is activated and you are learning and you are firing on all cylinders. These moments can be found when we honor play and we observe play and we don't interrupt it anymore. We embrace the power of a child's natural wonder, discovery, and curiosity of the world around them by providing uninterrupted periods of play. This space that we provide for their intrinsic motivation to be activated makes way for learning, your letters, your numbers, your math, your literacy, etc. And it makes way for it to be easeful, joyful, and an overall very natural and pleasant experience instead of, oh, okay, let me do all this rote memorization worksheets, morning work bin type of thing. Also been there, done that, and I've learned, and I've moved into a different direction. Child-led and adult-supported. This is huge here. Child-led and adult-supported. Again, is the space we're sharing with children really honoring their learning journey, or is it really about us? The 15-minute rule too, this is beautiful. This is really a good picture and vignette of how the intrinsic motivation works, how it becomes activated. For the first 15 minutes, a child is just exploring their options in the space. This is, excuse me, this is like window shopping, right? When you go to like TJ Maxx and you're just kind of zooming around, looking at all the things until something catches and holds your attention. That usually lasts about 15 minutes. The next 15 minutes, that brings you to a 30-minute time marker. Now, 30 minutes have passed. A child has had the time and the freedom to decide what engages them and what attracts them or what interests them. They've now had that time to decide and then engage in a very deep and meaningful personal way in that thing, that activity, and they have activated their intrinsic motivation. So now their brain is super duper sticky and they're ready to learn why things spin or why things roll or why things don't stay on a flat surface because they're round. They're really starting to experiment with all the things. This often looks very, very messy. Add another 15 minutes to that, right? Now you're at like the magic point, 45 minutes. This is what I highly recommend people to like search for, is 45 minutes of uninterrupted play. Now you're not only activated the intrinsic motivation, but you are in such a deep state of play that like the learning is like the rate of learning is astronomical. You're learning like 40% more than you would be if you were just in a kind of like direct teaching experience. And then If you have the time, if you can do 60 minutes, I mean, the more the merrier, your play becomes more imaginative, immersive, and self-led. This is when you witness children in their own universe. Like you don't even know, doesn't make sense to us because we're not in it, but they're so deep in it that they lose track of time. Like they're in a whole nother world. And these are really powerful moments. These are times that we likely experienced in our special play places that we imagined at the very beginning of this course, at this training. So that 60-minute mark is something to consider when we're reflecting on our special places that we played in as children. We likely had a lot of time to get to this point where our intrinsic motivation is activated, our brain is sticky, and we are in a deep state of imaginative and joyful learning. And then where these little asterisk stars are, like this is where sticky learning happens and it becomes a flow state. Like they're just doing the thing. What does sticky learning look like? Right? These are all actually things that could become play barriers or could be play barriers for different educators. Endless streams of questions, experimenting with different substances or textures, really immersive situations that are messy, and really embracing something that's new. So this is just an idea, kind of loose concept of what sticky learning looks like in the classroom. I think I've got like, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. So we're going to just do one practice from each section here. I'm going to put up some scenes, some play scenarios on the screen, and I'm going to ask you to use the chat to type in your initial reaction to this play scenario. Don't use a filter. Like if you think, oh my gosh, this person can poke their eye out, please do say that. I want you to be really free to express yourself here. And this is going to help you to uncover some play barriers. When I do this training in person, we spend a lot of time on this, and it's really very powerful for educators to really unpack the things that come up for them. So that's what we're going to do in the first round. I've got one example today. I have more, but we don't have time. And then we're going to go back and try again with a different play scenario using that benefits of play checklist, which you don't have right now, but you can imagine in these scenarios what learning is actually happening, what developmental milestones are being reached. So
Aid, it looks like we have
yes.
until 11:15, so we've got about a half an hour. So you've got a little bit more time than I initially thought. So take the time you
Wonderful.
need.
Okay, great. That's so perfect. All right. So while we go through these play scenarios, some things that you might want to ask yourself is, how does this play make me feel? What is it stirring up for me? Right? These are the ways that we start to uncover the play barriers. It feels like we did a lot of kind of like back work to get to this point, but it's very, very important, right? We got through the how, and now we're going to get through the why and the what. So how is this play making me feel? I'm going to put, I'll keep these questions kind of available to myself so I can remind them to you as I have the different play scenarios up. Think about why you might want to step into this play scenario. What would drive you to step in? And what would you say if you interjected? Think about that acronym. Wait, why am I talking? What would you say? And is it reflective of maybe something you're nervous about, afraid about, maybe hurt feelings, conflict, judgment from colleagues or parents? Again, these are all examples that I drew from other folks that have taken this course and myself. I kind of muddle through this stuff on the daily. So let's keep these questions in mind as we address scenario number one. I'm going to leave this up for maybe about a minute or so. This was a rainy day in, let's see, probably March here in Maine. So it was probably like 30 degrees, rainy, wet day. And I came upon this exchange in the mud kitchen. So as you look at this play scenario, think about how this makes you feel. If you came upon this in your classroom, would you step in? Why would you want to step in? What would you say if you stepped in? And what does that idea of what you would say or what that need is to step in, what does that say about how you're feeling? You could put that in the chat. You can write it in a notebook and keep it to yourself. But please share your reflections if you feel comfortable. Slippery, absolutely. I mean, literally everything from their head to their toe is slippery, from the plastic bucket on their head to their rain gear, their boots, the leaves. So there is some risk there. Agreed. Excuse me. Yeah, certainly there's some hazards. I see a dish by the left foot of the child wearing purple that she could step on as she moved forward. I see another dish in front of her right foot. And if they can't see in front of them, my goodness, they could fall. Oh dear. I love it, Kathy. It looks like they found a good way to stay dry. Yes, I love that kind of reframe of, what might they be thinking of? What, instead of what am I thinking? What were they thinking? And you kind of really hit the nail on the head there. We're going to address that in a few slides. I'm going to share another scenario since we have a little bit of extra time, because I really believe this work is so powerful with the scenarios because it's some active reflection. So let's see. Here is a second scenario. This was a summer, probably early August, in a field here in Maine. This kind of physical, what I like to call puppy dog play, happened for, they did this for a really long time, probably, just shy of an hour, exchanging different ways to move their bodies. So how does this play make you feel? If you were observing, would you interject? What would you say? What does that tell you about how you're feeling? What does that maybe illuminate as a barrier for yourself? Looks like a game of predator play, right? There's some place-based learning happening there. What's a predator? What is prey? What are different examples of predator and prey? You can really use this play scenario as a launching point for further learning. Love it. A lot of times when I share this in a larger group, there's some feelings around violent play. There's some feelings around physical play with girls. And that kind of like uncovers a lot of personal barriers for different educators and caregivers around what play is permissible for different gendered children, or just how they feel comfortable supporting that, or if they don't feel comfortable supporting that. And so then we work through different ways on how we can communicate with our co-teachers, and how we could find ways to facilitate something that we feel a little bit out of our comfort zone. This was just such a great day. Sometimes the physical play does get kind of intense, and you read the children, you hear what they're doing, you read their body language, you look at their facial expressions, and very often we can step in and say, hey, I just want to check in, like, are you okay? Is it okay if this person does this? How does this feel? Do you like this? Is this what you want to do? We just do a lot of like affirming questions, so the child has an opportunity to really express whether they want to do this activity or not, because sometimes they just aren't sure if they want to, and that's okay too. And then one more, just for good measure. I do love this as well. This play scenario is so joyful to me. But I've also worked with a lot of teachers who this would just be like, like not cool because of the mess. What if they don't have extra gear? What if, their parent doesn't like when their things get dirty? Things like that. It's just, this is a really great example of the joy that nature-based and play-based learning can bring to an early learning environment. I love it so much. Yeah, right. So Melody made a great comment about not wanting to clean up the mess. So what types of like logistical things can we have in place to facilitate this kind of thing? Can we help in some way? Do we have to leave it up to the custodial folks? Do we find a way where we can do this in some space, some capacity? So a lot of the barriers, like, we're afraid that this person doesn't want to help clean up the mess. Like, well, what if we took our responsibility on to do that and the children became a part of that too? That's another way that we can find a way to make this play more acceptable or more supported if we work together. I work with a lot of teachers too on just like asking for help and asking to do things a little bit differently than they've always been done, and just having an opportunity to ask questions and to help in different ways. And sometimes that's just enough to kind of shift the mood, etc. All right, so now we're going to do round two. Round two is I think I've got 2 different examples for you. And instead of thinking of the things that are going to keep you from facilitating this type of play happening in your learning environment, I'm going to invite you to consider how this play scenario is developmentally appropriate. If we were in person, you would have examples of the benefits of play checklist and the cards to use, but I'm going to ask you guys to just be imaginative and use your beautiful child development brains to answer these questions. So we'll take a look at these 2 scenarios and ask the questions: how is this play developmentally appropriate? Where is the evidence that the intrinsic motivation is being activated, right? Where the brain is sticky and true deep learning is happening. And why is this play scenario child-led? So I've got 2 examples for you. Thank you, Sarah, for putting that stuff in the chat. Play scenario number 4. You can imagine this picture had sound. It was very boisterous, very loud. And it was a moment where, oh, I love that, Kathy. Yes, physics concept at play here for sure. It was this joyful sound that you couldn't really determine if it was joyful or like not joyful. So we did have to get a little closer and just check in. So no, it's hard for me to tell. This okay? Does it feel okay in your body? And a resounding yes from all 6 of these cherub children. And yeah, so what evidence might you see in this play scenario that the intrinsic motivation is being activated? What do you see that tells you that they have had time to activate their intrinsic motivation, their play intuition, as I also like to call it? And you can consider those things, whether you're writing them in your notebook or you're sharing them in the chats. Indeed. Totally developmentally appropriate because they are working through cooperation. They're communicating their needs, reading their body language, and cueing children to read other people's body language too is another huge developmentally appropriate thing to talk about in this scenario. they were calling, I think they named this activity, they called it like the school bus or something. I can't remember. They had like some name that didn't make any sense to me or my co-teacher, which is to me a sign that their intrinsic motivation has been activated, because they're so deep in play here that the context doesn't make any sense to me as an adult. But they are so happy. They've made their own rules. They've practiced consent. And they did this was a game that they played for a very, 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 very long time, over and over again, throughout the year. I love it. Yeah. And another reason I love this play scenario specifically is because it really just touches on like the number one rule on like 99% of playgrounds in like the entire world is no climbing up the slide, or one person at a time. And they would climb up. We have a ladder, obviously, but they didn't use the ladder. They would all come off and they'd all climb up, and then they'd all pile up. Like they just did it their own way. They had their own set of rules, which is another huge example of why it's child-led, and how they spent enough time here to activate their intrinsic motivation and kind of really get deep into that flow state of play, where again, it doesn't make sense to me, but I'm not in it. If I'm in it, I know all the rules. Play scenario number 5. This is our last example, and then we'll start kind of wrapping up a little bit. How is this play developmentally appropriate? Where is the evidence that the intrinsic motivation is activated? Here in this beach scene. Why is this child? This is a little more obscure of an example. Developmentally appropriate learning is happening, right? With balance. They're exploring in and of itself is an example of intrinsic motivation, right? You're following your play intuition, you're letting that lead you to the next thing. Sensory play, hugely developmentally appropriate, absolutely. They're self-paced, they're where they feel comfortable. They're honoring their own ideas, thoughts, feelings, comfort levels. Ooh, yeah, nice. Kathy, science, looking at the ripples in the water, shapes, textures on their feet. That seaweed pops when you step on it. Ooh, it's all just so great. I had this group of children for a summer, and we just went like beach hopping all over Maine. And this was one of our favorite spots. They really loved it because the sand smelled. I don't really know what it smelled like, but they liked the way that it smelled. And so we called it the smelly beach. And and the sand was nearly black. It was very dark gray and black, and they just loved that. So that summer, I really leaned into the child-led and like, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Why do you like this place? What do you notice about this place? There was also, all the way to the right in this picture, there were huge rocks to climb that went all along the coast. And so, there's some fine and gross motor going on there, balance, proprioception, so much happening in a natural scene. I wonder if there was a lot of iron. I don't know a lot about sand makeup, but it could be. It was very, very soft and fine, and really, really dark. I wish I had a picture of it. And it would get really hard, but also soft, and they would draw on it. So they would use sticks and shells to do drawings on the beach instead of bringing art supplies. We used the earth. So yeah, A+ everyone, doing great work. This is a great exercise to go through with your team. If you have snapshots of play that's happening in your classroom, and kind of go through these questions to uncover play barriers, and then really flip the script to figure out, why is this actually developmentally appropriate? You can use the play benefits of play checklist if you have that printed or shared with your team, and really just use these little scenarios as evidence of play and really unpack them like a play detective. So here's when we get to the tactical stuff. This is the good stuff. And this is how we can continue to lean into observation, lean into being child-led, let play lead the way, facilitate long periods of play to activate that intrinsic motivation. And these are things that we can do to address our play barriers, but also move past them, really just through them, not past them like, oh, there you are, I'm leaving you there. You're just like, hey, play barrier, I see you, I understand you, I'm going to move forward anyway, even though I know that you're right here in the back of my mind. All right, you're kind of rewriting your own script with every reiteration of this. Let's see. All right, so the first tool is, let's see, let me just overview and back up a little bit here. So there are some tools that I go over in my Great Observer course in much more depth, but today I'm just going to touch on them really briefly. And you really want to focus on observation and engagement. A lot of times people ask me, like, that's great, Aid, you do this with young children, like, but does this work with older kids? It absolutely does. It takes a little bit more kind of practice and shifting of things, but these are really kind of broad concepts that can be used in any learning environment with really anyone. I mean, I even do this with like my dogs and I see the way they play, or I'm in the park and I'm watching how people interact with one another. Observation tools are applicable for all ages and really any scenario. So I'm going to go over these three straightforward tools that serve as a dependable support system for cultivating an environment that sustains learning through extended periods of uninterrupted play. It's going to be really crucial to recognize that the mastery of these skills requires practice and patience. Grant yourself the grace to just grow in this process. It doesn't really happen overnight, but you can get started right away. Over time, again, with practice and every rep, these tools are going to become second nature. They're going to be seamlessly integrated into your interactions with children and likely outside of the classroom too. That's where I'm at. I'm a great observer in all aspects of my life, doing constant reflection all the time. These tools are going to fortify the learning environment and support prolonged periods of uninterrupted play. Remember, that is the goal, right? We go back to that 15-minute rule. 30 minutes is awesome. 45 minutes is a sweet spot. If we can hit 60, that's awesome. And I know that if you're in a traditional classroom, a public school room, this is challenging, but it's doable if we figure out a way to be flexible. So if you want help with that, you can always reach out to me. And we do all this so that we can lay a foundation for robust developmental growth and learning. The very first one is write it down. Carry a notebook and a pencil in your back pocket. I did this with those, little teeny tiny spiral notebooks and a little Ticonderoga golf pencil. I stuck it in my back pocket, and then I got a teacher fanny pack and I put it in there. And I write down all the things that I see. If something starts to make me nervous, or I feel like a play barrier is bubbling up, I take out my notebook and I become very specific. I become that play detective. I use these notes in the future as valuable data because they have a time, the date, the specific activity the child was engaged in, the child's name, and whatever the interesting interaction was. Maybe it was a social conflict, maybe it was they're just really engaged in an interesting substance or activity, or maybe I'm directly quoting dialogue that is interesting. When you write down what you see, this is why this works. When you write down what you see, you stop your body from physically stepping in and interrupting play. You're giving yourself something else to do. This shows the children that you trust them to problem solve independently. It also offers an opportunity to trust that you, yes, you have taught them the skills to be lifelong learners, independent problem solvers, and advocates for themselves and others. So this, play barrier work is a lot about trust, right? We have shown them by the way we show up in our space with children, what trust, love, and confidence looks like. And we have to start trusting that they've picked up on that. And you will be surprised to see how beautiful children problem solve, without us. So writing it down is the very first tactical step that you can take to becoming a great observer and physically stop yourself from stepping in. This is the whole, we want to stay out of it, right? So this is the first one. Highly recommend this one. It's a really great place to start. Here is the second one. I call it talking it out, like walk it out, teasing out the problem or the play barrier that's bubbling up for you. Ask yourself hard and honest questions, kind of like the ones we did in these practice scenarios. Questions like, how is this play making me feel? Why do I want to step in? What would I say if I interjected? Am I afraid of something? Am I worried about hurt feelings, conflict, judgment? Any of that stuff. Really be vulnerable and honest with yourself. This is like, no one is going to hear your thoughts inside of your mind except for you. So you can really be safe in that space. And this is the work that really, really, really cracked open play barriers for me. So I mean, personally, highly recommend this. The next thing you can do as you kind of talk out what's coming up for you is you can wonder, what will the children do or say next? Can you predict their behavior? This is going to buy you a little time. Instead of stepping in, you can be like, oh, wow, I see that this child is dumping everything they get their hands on. Like, I wonder if they're going to find the bin of rice. I wonder if they're going to unload the block table or whatever. You can start kind of seeing if you can predict what happens. You can also ask yourself what valuable skills the children are building. Again, referring back to that benefits of play checklist. Children can solve problems beautifully if we stop solving them for them. This is a huge, huge takeaway. By stepping out and not projecting our own lived experiences and likely our fears, like fear of falling, fear of injury, fear of hurt feelings, and a judgment-free space for children to create their own positive experiences, we really are giving them the greatest gift and the most beautiful learning environment. And the last piece is making a play time capsule. This is interesting. Now, in the very beginning of this presentation, I shared with you that my two love languages are writing and photographs. And I use this method, this making a play time capsule, to build out my newsletters, to share parent communication, and to kind of document proof of learning in our classroom for parents and families that come to visit. It's been very, very powerful practice for me. So when you make a digital time capsule of play through the media machine in your back pocket, that's probably your phone. A lot of us have our phone within like a reach of I have mine right here. It's within very close reach. You can visit these videos and photos later on in the day or the evening and practice your reflection, right? This is a vital piece of becoming a great observer, of becoming someone who can recognize their play barriers and move through and past them. These videos and photos are going to be an opportunity for you to share your findings, like I mentioned, with parents, families, and newsletters. Our classrooms are kind of like this secret portal that parents don't truly get to see. So if we can get little vignettes and share what we see and how it is learning, we can start to get a little bit more buy-in into this play-based mentality. And again, this is just like the other two. Taking a photo or a video immediately takes the focus off of you and your personal discomfort and your need for control, speaking from experience, and it puts play and learning back in the spotlight. Again, we bring back to that notion that the space we share with children is a space for their learning. The videos and photos become proof of the magic that develops during long periods of uninterrupted play. The first year of teaching outside, I did this and sent a newsletter home every month. And within the first 6 to 8 months, the parents who weren't totally didn't have buy-in really to what we were doing, they knew it was a good idea, but didn't really get it. They really started to see the power and the magic, and they started to see the ripple effect in their child's learning journey. So sharing what we see and what we learn with our families is so, so important. So this third piece is just very, very helpful. If you, of course, get the consent from parents. Yeah.
I was gonna say, we have a really great question about the pictures too, that I just wanted to share, which is from Lila. She asked, do you use these videos / photos with the children to get their feedback or analysis?
Yes, sometimes we do. That is an excellent question. So especially if we have like a problem solving thing happening or something really interesting happened, we will share it with the group. I'll print them out. I try not to have the screen in the classroom. I can print out the pictures, but if we have to play a video, we can use a screen to do that. But it is really fascinating to show them, show videos of peers to other peers and get their feedback. And I highly suggest doing that if you have the opportunity to. It's an excellent practice. And likely, right, like we've been learning, the children are going to come up with brilliant things that we probably didn't even think of. So yeah, totally, absolutely do that. So we're just about wrapping up here. I don't know how I'm doing on time. I lost track of time. But just some ideas for building a resource. A lot of the times when we are learning new concepts, we get in this informational gathering phase. And there's lots of other ways instead of just like collecting all the books and reading all the articles and following all the people on social media, to build a personal resource library. So I invite you, as you practice your work with play barriers, as you practice employing and implementing more nature and play-based practices into your rhythms and routines, that you look beyond books and consider like the human connection and interaction. You know, we're kind of like getting out of the age of COVID and we are being brought back into this more like interactive community. So inviting other people to your program, visiting programs that have practices that align with your vision and personal pedagogy is really impactful. So I mean, if you're ever in Maine, y'all are welcome to come anytime and observe our classroom. It's really very powerful experience to see how other people problem solve, how they facilitate learning spaces, how they let children have their own unique voice in that space. So highly recommend visiting programs if you can, and ask everybody and anybody about how you're going to look or sound when you ask a question, because there is just so much information and so much experience out there for us to all learn from. So I encourage you to ask as many questions as possible. Like consider, what would you say to the, the younger version of yourself, right? If you teach second graders, if you were a second grader who had a question and were afraid to ask it, what might you say, to encourage you to ask questions? So right, there's no such thing as a silly question. All questions are valuable and important. So remind yourself of that as you're acquiring more information and resources. There's lots of Facebook groups out there too that are also helpful. There's lots of professional development networks. Texas Children in Nature is one of them. There's a ton of nature and play-based ones. I run one called the Nature and Play-Based Consortium with my colleague Laura. And we meet monthly, it's free. And you can really have an opportunity to kind of broaden like your vision and your perspective of what's happening or what can happen in your learning environments. And I think it's really important that some of you have mentioned, like, what about older kids? You can totally do this with older children. And in my Great Observer course, I go through that a little bit more in depth on how and what that looks like for older kiddos. And in this Nature and Play-Based Consortium group, we have elementary school teachers as well who are practicing this in their public school setting. So again, this is a free group if you want to join it. Those resources are here. If you scan this QR code, you have access to the benefits of play checklist. Oh, gee, what else? There's a link to read more about the Nature and Play-Based Consortium. There's a discount link for the course that I mentioned. There's all sorts of other things in there that I can't remember. So please do take a picture of this or scan it. I don't know what the appropriate term is for QR codes, but this link should bring you to a page where you enter your email and then you'll be on my email list, and then you get access to all the extra benefits from today's presentation. I know I talked really fast. I want to thank you guys for trying to keep up with me and just for the beautiful insights during our practice. It just is really lovely to be here with you today. And Sarah, I don't know, is this the right time to ask for questions?
Yeah, feel free. I'm trying to put the link in. Some of you asked for the link for this QR code, so I'm putting that in right now.
Ooh,
but
smart. Thank you.
If anyone wants to hop off mute and ask a question, please feel free.
I had a question. I'm sorry, I don't have my face on because I'm feeding my daughter right now.
Oh, it's okay.
Sorry about that. I had a quick question. Um, my issue is that I'm in California and there's a lot of forest schools, which is fine. But
Mhm.
my issue is that I'm one of the only nature-based ones. So I have an in-home preschool, but I made my whole backyard. I was able to kind of do that. My issue is there's like, they have this thing where a lot of people are letting their kids sleep outside and a lot of people are letting their kids do certain things. Well, when I ask, there is no law against it. But then if you call licensing and you ask, they're kind of like, well, no, it's not really against it. But if the kids go outside, they might get a bug bite. So California says no. And I've like been asking this for years, and that's kind of their issues. Like, what if they get bit by a bug? And it's like, well, that could happen when they're outside playing.
True.
So I don't really know where to go with it. A lot of the webinars I get on, I find that it's out of Texas, it's out of, Nebraska, and like you said, you're in Maine. And I find that it's they're a little bit nicer with the licensing requirements. Do you have any ideas of that? Like I'm trying to do more because they're outside 90% of the time. So I'm happy at least,
Love it.
but I just
That's
wasn't.
amazing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what I can do. And sometimes when it comes to licensing, you just don't know, the analysts are very different. You have one that'll say nothing, you'll have another that'll say this. So I'm just trying to see, is it worth a battle of trying to get them to be able to sleep outside? Is it worth the battle of trying to get somebody told me to do a diaper changing station outside? But all of these ideas that I've put, I can't do. So I'm just trying to see what you guys think about that.
Yeah, we're going through licensing now. We're very close to becoming licensed and we had very similar questions. And what has been really helpful for me is instead of like just hearing like, no, you can't do that, and being like, okay, I don't like that answer, but okay. Just responding to the licensing either agent or whoever you're in connection with, saying, okay, like I hear you. How can we do this? What do we need to have in place? What would you suggest to have in place so that we can do this? So maybe it's here in Maine, our families all sign a waiver for ticks for Lyme disease because they're just a part of our lives here. They're very intense. So like maybe it's a waiver, maybe it's something in your policy, written about bug bites, or maybe you have them provide their own bug spray or whatever. I have found with every no that I have received from licensing, there is a way to turn it into a no, but, or a yes, and. So I just encourage you, if you've not already done that, it sounds like you've had a lot of communication, just to be like, well, how can I rephrase this question as to like, okay, what can I do so that I could do more of this? What precautions could I put in place? And sometimes it's just as simple as a waiver because, licensing really just wants to protect you. So I wonder if it could be that simple. I don't know. I do have a bunch of folks in the consortium that are in California. If you want to
Yeah,
email
I'm
me.
gonna get on there. I'm gonna get on there and look, but I
Yeah.
like the idea. And
Welcome.
and she's a new licensing analyst. I just got a new lady like the past couple months after COVID. So they switched all of our people around. So I don't even have the same. So that's a big difference now. So okay,
Yeah.
I can do that.
Great.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome. And thank you for doing the work that you're doing. It's incredible. Thank you.
Nisha, I also highly recommend if you're not on the Trailhead, which is a resource that Children in Nature Network International has, and I'm putting the link in the chat. You can join that, and there's lots of, I know that they do have some early childhood folks that are working in California, and you can put up your question on there, and it is really helpful for getting some resources from folks.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Okay, I see it. I'll do it right now.
Lila, I don't know of a Facebook group, but definitely that Trailhead that I just mentioned for sharing and asking questions. That's really great. And then Melody put in Green Schoolyards America. Also has some really great resources.
And also, like, just as a general thing to say, I think it's so important to start these conversations with our licensors because there is such a huge push for outdoor schooling standards, or not standards, like requirements like we have for regular licensing. A lot of times we have to fly under the radar as nature-based programs. And I think that we're heading in the right direction, that we don't have to do that anymore soon-ish. So having these conversations and really showing that ability to be flexible in your program or with, you know, whatever the licensing department is telling you need to do. I think it's a really good just way to push things forward towards getting licensing requirements specific for outdoor learning environments, because I think it's where we really want to be. So definitely always encourage you guys to have those conversations. And if you ever need a little extra boost of cheerleading, I'm your girl. Find me. I will always celebrate you.
I had a question as well.
Go ahead, Callie.
Yes. Is there a way to just book a, like, do you do like any kind of one-on-one, like kind of assistance, support for someone starting a school?
Absolutely. Yeah. I offer two
Okay.
different ways we can do that. I offer free 30-minute consults.
Okay.
I don't think that link is in the thing. I could try to pull it up real quick while we're on here. I do free 30-minute consults, or I do a 60 to 90-minute, and in that you get like a comprehensive review of everything that we talked about. You get links, you get resources, and then you also get a follow-up call so we can keep that accountability and momentum going. Let me see if I can find a link. You can pop it in the chat.
I'm very excited. Everything you were saying, I was just like, yes, this is what I'm fighting for. And this is, you know, like in my Meet the Teacher, I'm saying, hey, I'm messy. Like, please do not send them in clothes you care about. And, you know, just the fight to have to explain your teachings. So it's really nice to be with people who understand, because it's very tough to push and get it accepted. So it resonated and I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. And that's really why, like, you know, those groups like this exist, is the work that we're doing is, we're not alone, right? There's people all over the country, all over the world doing it, but it can feel really isolating because we still are going against the grain and swimming upstream. So it's important to just tie into those communities. And even if it's just a Facebook group or whatever it is, when you can find a community that feels like home and that you can be supported and celebrated at the same time, it makes a huge, huge difference. So I'm happy to help.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. We are at time. So I want to respect everyone's Saturday morning. But thank you everyone so much for joining. I did put a link in the chat to fill out our evaluation. I'll put that in there real quick again, in case you missed it earlier. If you could fill out our evaluation. All of us are teachers here. We understand the importance of some evaluations. If we could fill that out, that would be great. And then our next webinar is going to be on April 3rd, and it is on forest bathing research with Dr. Courtney Krim. And so we would love to see you there if you're interested. We did record, so you'll be getting the recording next week. But thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and thank you, Aid, so much for your presentation. It was fantastic, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.